So this video is going to take us through the defence of duress. We're going to focus our attention mostly on duress by threats, because that's what you should expect to see mostly in a scenario question. If it's an evaluation question, it's super important that you consider both threats and circumstances. You don't have to do an equal treatment of both, but you must consider both so the examiner knows that you know there are two different things. So starting with our scenario, we're advising Clancy as to whether he can use the defence of duress. So Clancy is threatened by his colleague Neil, who tells him that he'll tell the boss about Clancy's previous convictions for theft. Neil says that Clancy has to help him shoplift from a small corner shop by distracting the counter staff whilst Neil does the stealing. Clancy feels obligated to do this as he doesn't want to lose his job. So we're going to start with an introduction to what duress means in general. So when a person is put under considerable pressure to commit a crime or face death or serious injury to them or another for whom they feel responsible, then the defendant is faced with a terrible dilemma. The problem is that the defendant commits the actus reus and the mens rea, so the defence takes the circumstances into account. Duress can come in the form of a threat or the circumstances themselves. So we're going to state that duress can be used as a defence for all crimes except murder, manslaughter, possibly treason. We can explain that the case of Howe overruled DPP and Lynch and states that duress is not a defence to murder, and Gotts confirms that duress is not available for attempted murder either. In this case, Clancy is party to the theft in response to as a response to the threat from Neil, so it doesn't concern murder. So now we need to explain duress by threat specifically, because we've said it's a threat. The courts have to consider the seriousness of the harm that the accused is being threatened with and the criminal behaviour that they commit, so it's got to be broadly in proportion. In deciding if the defence should succeed, the jury must consider the two-stage Graham test, which was approved in Howe. So there's the subjective element. Did the defendant feel that they had to act in the way that they did because they reasonably believed that they would face death or serious injury? And would a person of reasonable firmness and with the same characteristics as the defendant respond in the same way as the defendant? So in this scenario, Clancy would not pass the subjective test. He didn't fear death or serious injury. His concern was over losing his job. Also, the reasonable man would not fear violence from this threat. So even though our defendant has actually failed at the first hurdle, we have to continue on. The defendant had the opportunity, so the threat must be unavoidable. In this case, we have the case of Gilks. Defendant had the opportunity to inform the police, therefore he can't use the defence. Hudson and Taylor, the threat was considered to be imminent as the defendants were witnesses in the trial, and those threatening them were in the gallery despite the fact that they were police. And Aaron Hassan, the defendant knew he was involved with a criminal gang in the past, so he put himself in the way of possible threats. So in this case, the threat may have been avoidable. Either Clancy could have spoken to the police or to his employer. Next, we have to state that you can't have self-induced duress, whereby the defendant places themselves in harm's way. And this is seen in the case of Hassan, where the defendant joined a criminal gang, so was unable to use the defence when he was put under the threat because he should have realised that this could happen. And in this case, Clancy's in the position to be put under duress because he initially lied to his boss and has a criminal record. And this could be considered self-induced duress, and therefore he can't use the defence. Super quickly, let's have a look at a scenario with duress by circumstances. So Sanjeet's wife threatens to kill herself. She's very depressed because they're heavily in debt. She tells Sanjeet she'll throw herself under a train unless he can get money, and he obtains it by robbing the local off license. Well, we can say that it's the circumstances, and this is seen in the case of Willa, and we apply the Graham test. Would the defendant feel that they had to act in this way or else somebody will face death or serious injury? Yes. Would somebody else of reasonable firmness have felt the same? Yes. Did he have the reasonable and genuine perception of the threat? Yes. Therefore, the defence is available.